Chess is a perfect information game, where everything you need to know is laid out on the board in front of you. Nothing is hidden and nothing is ambiguous. The ability of machines to learn in these circumstances is contingent on the fact that they can't misread what has already happened. They can only misjudge what may happen next, and then try not to make that mistake again. Computer won't confuse a rook for a knight, but outside the world of perfect information games, even the smartest machines regularly misidentify objects, misinterpret language, and misunderstand nuance. They struggle with information whose source is unclear and whose character is open to question. As one of the speakers who followed Haspus pointed out, deep learning machines are still capable of mistaking turtles for rifles. Don't ask me how. So no one should feel confident that this technology is ready to be weaponized. You might want Alpha Zero fighting your chess battles for you. You wouldn't want it fighting your wars. That said, DeepMind's summary mission statement is not lacking in ambition. Number 1, solve intelligence. Number 2, use that to solve everything else.
This is a Douglas Adams thing.
What solving intelligence means here is instrumentalizing it, turning it into a tool that can be used by machines. Haspus puts this slide up at the start of his presentation, and then he talked about chess and Go for 40 minutes. Only at the end did he come back to that question of the wider social implications of his work, and expressed his hope that this technology would soon be delivering equally impressive results in healthcare, science, and energy. He did not provide details. Is Alpha Zero really a step on the road to solving intelligence? It all depends on what we mean by intelligence, which is the question that machine learning cannot defer forever. When he showed us some of the astonishing chess moves made by his machine, Haspus laughed with pleasure at the hilarity of it, as though it was a kind of joke. His audience laughed too, because it was funny to see something so outlandish. But the computer wasn't joking. We were only laughing at and with ourselves. Alpha Zero may have overcome thousands of years of human civilization in a few days, but those same thousands of years of civilization have taught us to register in an instant forms of communication that no machine is close to being able to comprehend. Chess is a problem to be solved, but language is not. And this kind of open-ended intelligence isn't either. Nor is language simply a problem-solving mechanism. It is what enables us to model the world around us. It allows us to decide which problems are the ones worth solving. These are forms of intelligence that machines have yet to master. Before Haspus spoke, the child psychologist Alison Gopnik took to the stage to remind the audience that many human beings aren't so hot at this kind of intelligence either. That included all of the humans in the room, notwithstanding their unusually high IQs. The most creative modelers of new information environments are children. The older we get, the less flexible our intelligence becomes. When we are very young, we are much more likely to be open to new ways of thinking and to countenance unlikely hypotheses. That doesn't make children any good at getting things done, especially if it involves a lot of planning. Frankly, kids are terrible at concerted action, but they are excellent at imaginative reasoning. In Gopnik's memorable phrase, children think like theorists, whereas adults think like decision makers. Human development turns out to be a trade-off between plasticity and efficiency. As we become more efficient at making decisions, we gradually lose our capacity to absorb the things that don't fit with the world we know. We become more intelligent with age, and we become less intelligent with age. In one sense, children are the alpha zeros of the natural world. They start a lot of their thinking from scratch and try to work things out for themselves. Context trumps prejudice until we learn better. But in another sense, children are nothing like Alpha Zero because they are doing their learning in an open information environment, packed with human input and ambiguity. They are also learning how to play, which is something else kids are exceptionally good at. Despite being a game, chess is not play. It is a practical business. Some of the Alpha Zero's moves may look playful, but only humans would be capable of seeing them in those terms. To the machine, everything is about getting the job done. The danger of conceiving intelligence in these terms is that it makes everything else about getting the job done too. What we gain in efficiency, we lose in plasticity.
Plasticity.
Undoubtedly, there are plenty of jobs that could be done better than humans manage at present. That is the great promise of machine learning. Healthcare, energy, and transportation systems are all riddled with inefficiencies that these machines could help to eradicate. Until I arrived in Long Beach, I'd never used Uber before. After a few days, I couldn't imagine living without the service it provides, in a city where I had to walk half a mile just to cross the freeway outside my motel. There was something almost magical about the time, money, and peace of mind it saved me. I know Uber has a very mixed reputation, and some people said I should be using Lyft, which treats its drivers better. Maybe I should have thought harder about that. But my Uber experience was so spectacularly efficient that I didn't think about it at all. Is Uber intelligent? Ironically, that is what I was at NIPS to talk about. Not Uber specifically, but corporations in general were my remit at the symposium. Just as adult human beings are not the only model for natural intelligence, along with children, we heard about the intelligence of plants and animals. Computers are not the only model for intelligence of the artificial kind. Corporations are another form of artificial thinking machine, and that they are designed to be capable of taking decisions for themselves. Information goes in and decisions come out that cannot be reduced to the input of individual human beings. The corporation speaks and acts for itself. Many of the fears that people now have about the coming age of intelligent robots are the same ones they have had about corporations for hundreds of years. If these artificial creatures are taking decisions for us, how can we hold them to account for what they do? In the words of the 18th century jurist Edward Thurlow, corporations have neither bodies to be punished nor souls to be condemned. They may therefore do as they like. We've always been fearful of mechanisms that ape the mechanical side of human intelligence without the natural side. We fear that they lack a conscience, that they can think for themselves, but they don't really understand what it is that they are doing. When corporations misbehave, we look for human beings to blame.
Although you can't really blame them.
If we don't like Uber, we try to pin it on Travis Kalanick and punish him where we can, which turns out to be harder than it looks. As I write, he is poised to sell 1.4 billion shares in the company. The problem is that Kalanick is not Uber. He goes, but the business goes on. Of course, corporations are not inherently bad any more than any other kind of machine, but they are not neutral either. They provide many benefits for their human creators, which is why we can't live without them. Corporations have shown themselves to be remarkable devices for pooling resources, finding efficiencies, driving innovation, and increasing value. But there is still something ghostly about corporate identity. We inhabit a world dominated by these entities, and yet we have little understanding of how they think. We don't really know whether they think at all. 300 years of worrying about corporate responsibility has produced an enormous patchwork of laws and regulations trying to define it, and a vast army of lawyers and accountants trying to redefine it, but there has been little progress in understanding what goes on inside the black box of the corporate mind. What does Uber want? We could still be asking that question long after the company has taken over the world's transportation systems. As well as being a showcase for the latest research, NIPS is also a job fair, and all the big tech companies are represented at glossy booths stuffed by fresh-faced young recruiters. The most famous names are present, of course, including Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Microsoft. So too, at even bigger and glossier booths are giant Chinese companies such as Alibaba, Baidu, and Didi, the Chinese Uber. The Chinese have increasingly been driving research in machine learning, particularly as a tool for targeting consumers. There's also a host of newer entrants into the market with wonderfully indeterminate names: Recursion, Quantum Black, XPRIZE, Crowdflower, Criteo Research, Volion Group. Some of these are the offshoots of far more established players. Quantum Black is the machine learning wing of McKinsey, the ubiquitous management consulting firm. All seem to be engaged in an unspoken contest to see who can come up with the most aspirational mission statement. Crowdflower, the essential human-in-the-loop AI platform. Criteo, let's connect more shoppers to things that they need and love. XPRIZE, an innovation engine, a facilitator of exponential change, a catalyst for the benefit of humanity. That one probably wins. Because many of these enterprises have only been around for a decade or less, they are the children of the corporate world. It is tempting to think they might have some of that childlike curiosity and imaginative capacity that characterizes the early stages of human development. Certainly that's how they would like to present themselves. All of their iconography is intended to signal that these are places where out-of-the-box thinking is encouraged and human intelligence is given free rein. But that's a false prospectus, because corporations aren't really children. They are still just money-making machines. Too often, the story we hear about the coming of AI focuses exclusively on the interaction between the super-smart individuals like Hassibus and the super-smart algorithms like AlphaZero. Yet behind both lie super-powerful corporate actors, which are neither. One day, perhaps, humans will build the intelligent robots capable of supplanting us. But for now, the biggest threat to our collective survival comes from the corporate machines we first started building hundreds of years ago to make our lives easier, and have never really learned how to control. If we do end up manufacturing killer robots, it won't be because humans have made it happen. It will be because the corporations for which they worked didn't know how to stop it. Something else that made the sponsors' hall feel a little strange was the gender distribution on display. More than 85% of the attendees at NIPS are male. In a crowd this size, that still leaves plenty of room for diversity, but taken together, the impression is one of uniformity. Lots of men dressed in jeans and t-shirts, talking about cool new stuff in a language it was hard for an outsider like me to understand. By contrast, a disproportionate number of the recruiting staff of the corporate booths were women. These companies were clearly keen to put their best face forward, to indicate to would-be employees that they were diverse and progressive places to work. On the basis of what was going on elsewhere at the conference, this was mainly just for show. Looking for a different perspective, I went in search of an organization called Women in Machine Learning to ask if I could sit in on their event. I assured them I was an academic writing for a respectable publication, but they suspected I was just another greedy hack hoping for lurid tales of the horrors of being a woman in a male-dominated industry. After I left NIPS, I saw the snowshoes posted on a conference website under the heading, Statement on Inappropriate Behavior. NIPS has a responsibility to provide an inclusive and welcoming environment for everybody involved in the fields of AI and machine learning. Unfortunately, several events held at or in conjunction with the 2017 conference fell short of these standards. We are determined to do better in 2018 and beyond. I didn't notice any of this while I was there. Perhaps I should have been looking harder. The nice people at Weimel welcomed me anyway. The atmosphere wasn't so different from the rest of the conference. Practical, serious-minded, problem-oriented. The president of Weimel reminded me that her organization did not exist to provide a haven for women within machine learning, but a platform for more women to do more machine learning. It was a support group and a professional network. Despite the overall balance of numbers at NIPS, it seemed to be doing its job well. Most of the presentations at Weimel were as technically oriented and, for me, as daunting as the presentations happening outside. But not all. The opening talk was given by Raya Hadzel, a research scientist on the deep learning team at DeepMind. She didn't discuss her own work, but rather her route into the machine learning business, which had been a circuitous one. Her undergraduate degree was in philosophy and religious studies. At the same time, she'd always been a lover of games and puzzles, and after graduating, she took a further degree in maths before retraining as a computer scientist. The title of her PhD thesis was Learning Long-Range Vision for Off-Road Robots. Now, here she was, still open to new ideas. She also talked about her mother, who had worked as an artist for 30 years before learning in her 60s how to code and becoming a successful computer game designer. Hadzel's message was to stay curious, but also to stay committed. Her talk didn't have the evangelical fervor of the presentation given by Hasibus, who was now her boss. In some ways, it was a dose of solid good sense that could have been delivered at any academic or professional conference, but that made it particularly resonant at this one. It was very human, and it was still with me later as I got an Uber back to my motel through the clear Los Angeles night, trusting that someone, somewhere, had put out the fires.